Your hardest workout might burn fewer calories this week than a walk. Not per minute, obviously. Burpees win that tiny, deeply unpleasant competition. But across the whole week, walking can win, because the workout doesn't end when you stop exercising. Your joints have to recover, your appetite may change, your energy can drop, and without noticing, you may spend the rest of the day moving less. That background movement matters much more than most people realize. In fact, the calories burned through standing, fidgeting, pacing, chores, and ordinary walking can vary by roughly 2,000 calories per day between similarly sized people. Yes, per day. That doesn't mean you can casually fidget away an entire pizza. Fitness marketing may be optimistic, but biology hasn't completely lost supervision. It means the workout is only one piece of your daily energy use, and if a brutal workout causes you to spend the next 2 days sore, exhausted, and emotionally committed to the sofa, some of the workout's calorie burn quietly disappears. This is why walking can be a smarter starting point for someone carrying more body weight and returning to exercise. Not because walking is magical, because it builds the system that makes exercise repeatable. Picture two beginners. One starts a 5-day HIIT plan after years of being mostly sedentary. The first session is technically successful. Heart pounding, clothes soaked, legs filing formal complaints. Then comes the soreness. The next workout gets postponed. Normal daily movement drops. The stairs suddenly seem unnecessary. By week 3, the plan has quietly become a decorative app notification. The other person walks for 30 minutes at a manageable pace. They finish feeling like they could have done a little more. The next day, they do it again. A few weeks later, they're walking faster, taking the stairs occasionally, and pacing during phone calls. Same intention, different biological response. The first person trained hard. The second person built capacity. And here's the first hidden problem: joint force. When you walk, your knee doesn't experience only your body weight. Ordinary walking can create forces of roughly 2 to 4 times body weight at the knee. Every step creates force that travels through the ankle, knee, and hip. Muscles help absorb it, so do cartilage, tendons, ligaments, and other connective tissues. Now add speed, jumping, or running. The force rises. Add more body weight, it rises again. So when someone carrying extra weight starts with high-impact intervals, the joints aren't receiving a motivational speech. They're receiving repeated mechanical loads, hundreds or thousands of times. Your joints do not care that the workout was labeled beginner-friendly. Biology, famously, does not read the label. This doesn't mean people with higher body weight shouldn't eventually run, jump, or train intensely. It means the body needs time to prepare for those forces. The cardiovascular system can improve surprisingly quickly. You may feel fitter within weeks. Connective tissue is slower. Tendons, ligaments, cartilage, and supporting muscles need gradual exposure to load. If your breathing improves before those tissues are ready, you can feel capable of doing more than your joints can currently tolerate. That gap is where overuse problems like to set up an office. Research on running injuries has found about 17.8 injuries per 1,000 hours among novice runners, compared with roughly 7.7 among recreational runners. The beginner isn't weak. The beginner is unadapted. That distinction matters. A body can adapt to stress if the dose leaves enough room for recovery. Too little stress doesn't create much adaptation. Too much stress creates pain, fatigue, missed sessions, or injury. Walking sits in a useful middle zone. It creates cardiovascular and muscular demand while keeping impact lower than running and jumping. And remember, easy isn't a universal speed. A pace that feels moderate to a trained person may feel close to maximum effort for someone who has been sedentary. Why? Because everyone has a different aerobic ceiling. Your muscles need oxygen to produce energy efficiently. Your heart and lungs have to deliver it. When the demand gets close to your current capacity, the body relies more heavily on faster, less sustainable energy pathways. Breathing gets harder. The legs burn. The desire to stop becomes extremely well-researched. So, when an untrained person becomes breathless during an activity that looks easy to someone else, that isn't proof of laziness. It's a lower fitness ceiling. Same movement, same sidewalk, completely different percentage of available capacity. Studies have even found that adults with overweight or obesity may naturally choose a moderate walking pace with a workload around 6% lower than a prescribed laboratory pace. That isn't failure. That's self-regulation. The body is selecting an effort it believes it can sustain, and early in a fitness program, sustainable is not a disappointing compromise. Sustainable is the entire business model. Structured walking programs in sedentary adults with overweight or obesity have achieved adherence above 90% while producing measurable improvements in body mass, waist measurements, and blood sugar control. The changes from any single walk may be small, but small is allowed to accumulate. A workout you complete 5 times has a strange mathematical advantage over a workout you complete once and then avoid, like someone who wants to discuss cryptocurrency at dinner. Now we need to talk about the calorie burn you don't see. It's called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That means nearly all the movement you do outside formal exercise. Standing, cleaning, shopping, pacing, taking stairs, walking through a parking lot, changing positions, and fidgeting while pretending to understand a group chat. These movements look trivial individually. Across an entire day, they can become a major part of energy expenditure. And NEAT is largely unconscious. You usually don't notice yourself moving less after a hard workout. You just sit a little longer, drive instead of walking, leave the laundry for tomorrow. Ask whether the object across the room is truly necessary. Your body is conserving energy without sending you a calendar invitation. So, imagine a hard session burns a satisfying number of calories. Lovely. But afterwards, soreness and fatigue reduce your daily movement. You sit more, take fewer steps, and skip the next workout. The session still counted, but the net effect may be smaller than the exercise tracker suggests. Walking is less likely to wreck the rest of the day. For some people, it does the opposite. It creates momentum. You walk in the morning, feel more alert, and continue moving normally. Maybe you take another short walk after dinner. Maybe your normal pace gradually increases. The walk supports the rest of your movement instead of competing with it. That's the hidden logic. You aren't trying to win one workout. You're trying to build an active week. And then there's hunger. Hard exercise can temporarily suppress hunger signals, including the hormone ghrelin. This appears more reliably at higher exercise intensities, but the research comes largely from small, short-term laboratory studies. Interesting mechanism, not a universal promise. Some people eat less after exercise, some eat more, some don't change at all. But compensatory eating isn't controlled only by hunger hormones. Psychology gets involved because, apparently, metabolism needed a committee. A grueling, unpleasant workout can create a sense of earning food. I suffered for 45 minutes, therefore this meal has no consequences. The body did not approve that accounting method. People may choose larger portions or more indulgent foods after exercise they experienced as difficult or unpleasant, not necessarily because their stomach created overwhelming hunger, but because the workout felt like a sacrifice deserving compensation. That doesn't mean you should fear food after exercise. Your body needs nourishment and recovery. It means exercise calories are easy to overestimate, while food calories are easy to underestimate. If every hard session becomes a negotiation over what you've earned, the calorie deficit may become much smaller than expected. An enjoyable walk creates less psychological drama. You exercised, you continue with your day. No heroic suffering, no ceremonial reward meal. Almost suspiciously reasonable. So how should a beginner use walking? Start with a duration and pace you can recover from comfortably. You should feel warmer, breathe somewhat harder, and still be able to speak in sentences. If you can only manage 5 or 10 minutes comfortably, start there. That counts. The body adapts to repeated signals, not impressive opening ceremonies. For the first 4 to 8 weeks, walking may be a better foundation than running, especially if you've been sedentary, carry significantly more body weight, or have concerns about your joints. Increase duration before intensity. Add a few minutes. Build more total time on your feet. Let the heart, muscles, and connective tissues adapt before adding hills, faster intervals, or impact. And don't increase everything at once. More days, more minutes, more speed, steeper hills, and new shoes that have apparently made you invincible. That is not gradual progression. That is 5 separate stress increases wearing one tracksuit. Choose footwear that feels supportive and terrain that feels predictable. Flat routes are often easier at first. If outdoor walking isn't comfortable, an indoor track, treadmill, pool, or low-impact machine may be useful. Protect your ordinary movement, too. A formal walk is good, but standing more, taking a brief walk after meals, pacing during calls, and doing regular daily tasks can increase your total movement without creating one huge recovery bill. An extra 280 to 350 calories per day from non-exercise movement is sometimes suggested as a useful weight loss target, but don't treat that as a guaranteed personal number. Energy use varies widely. The practical point is simpler. Don't exercise so hard that you stop moving afterward. Track consistency rather than punishment. How many walks did you complete this week? How long can you walk comfortably now? Is your breathing improving? Are hills becoming easier? Do you recover by the next day? Those are signs the system is developing. Once walking feels easier and recovery is reliable, you can add short, faster sections. Walk normally, increase the pace briefly, then slow down again. Later, resistance training can help strengthen the muscles that support the joints. Harder training isn't the enemy. Bad timing is. Walking prepares your cardiovascular system, muscles, joints, and routine so harder training becomes something you can use instead of something you survive once. Stop and get medical advice if exercise causes chest pain, fainting, unusual severe breathlessness, or sudden or persistent joint pain. If you have an existing heart, lung, metabolic, or joint condition, a qualified healthcare professional can help you choose an appropriate starting level. For everyone else, remember the actual goal, not maximum suffering, not the most impressive calorie number on Tuesday. Not proving that you can override every warning signal until Thursday becomes a recovery documentary. The goal is a level of movement you can repeat while gradually building capacity. Because vigorous exercise does burn more per minute, but minutes you skip burn nothing. A workout that leaves you inactive for 2 days may lose to a walk that helps you stay active all week. Biology did not read the workout label. It read the total signal. So if you're starting, let walking be real exercise. Build the time, protect the joints, keep moving during the rest of the day, then increase the challenge when your body has earned the capacity, not when your motivation has rented it temporarily. What feels more sustainable for you right now? One longer daily walk or several short walks spread through the day? And if you want the mechanism behind the symptom, the biology behind the habit, and the hidden logic behind how your body actually works, subscribe to The Hidden Logic.